Someone in your circle right now is quietly wearing down your spirit, and you keep giving it soft names. Devotion, history, grace. Heaven has a different word for it, though, and I think it's time you heard it. There's a truth most believers walk right past. We're gonna walk through 6 friendships God is asking you to let go of. Not because He wants you isolated, but because a handful of relationships are quietly draining your peace, your purpose, and your closeness with Him in ways you've never stopped long enough to measure. Proverbs 12:26 puts it this way: "The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray." Carefully, not casually, not by drifting into it. Who you let close is a decision, and the wrong one can silently reroute your entire spiritual life while everything still looks fine on the surface. Not every warm smile is safe for you. Not every person who lingers near you belongs there. Come with me through each one. 1. The friend who can't keep your secrets. Their mouth never really closes, and everything you hand them eventually finds its way to someone else's ears. I remember a season that taught me one of the hardest lessons I've ever learned about trust. There was someone I let all the way in. I told them what I was struggling with. I told them things about my family, my doubts, the parts of my faith I was still wrestling to hold on to. I believed those conversations were sealed. Then one evening, standing in a room full of people we both knew, I heard my own words come back to me through someone else's mouth. Not a vague version, the exact details, the private things. What I thought was sacred had been spent like currency. Used to make that friend feel important. Used to fill silence when they had nothing else to bring to the table. Scripture does not soften this in Proverbs 20:19. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. Notice the command chosen. Avoid. Not correct them and wait. Not give one more opening. Avoid. Someone who spends your private life for a little attention will hand you someone else's private life the same way, and a friendship standing on borrowed trust will eventually sink into sand. If everyone's business seems to pass through their hands, yours already has too. Think of Achan in Joshua chapter 7, whose loose tongue and hidden bag of silver couldn't stay sealed, and it cost an entire camp its peace. Instead of handing your heart to someone whose mouth never learned to hold anything, pray this: Lord, sharpen my discernment for who has earned my trust. A kind knock doesn't always mean the door was meant to open. 2. The friend who is always at war. Their life is one long storm, and somehow you're always the one standing in the rain with them. You know this person. Someone always wronged them. Something always went sideways. They're perpetually offended, and it's always dressed up as passion, or justice, or simply being honest. I had a friend exactly like this once. Every conversation carried a fresh complaint. Every meeting introduced a new enemy. I'd leave their company stirred up, carrying an anger that was never mine to begin with, and I'd come home and snap at people I loved for absolutely no reason. Proverbs 22:24 and 25 gives one of the sharpest friendship warnings in the entire Bible. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Notice that the danger described isn't a direct wound. The danger is quietly becoming them. Anger spreads. Spend enough hours near a fire, and you'll start to smell like smoke whether you meant to or not. Think of Saul in 1 Samuel, a man whose rage consumed his own household, and eventually his own kingdom. Everyone standing too close to that fire got scorched by it too. You can't carry the peace God gave you if the person beside you is constantly setting things ablaze. Instead of absorbing their storm, pray this: Lord, protect the peace you've placed in me. Peace is not weakness. It's what keeps you standing when everyone around you has already caught fire. 3. The friend who only smiles until you're blessed. They love you exactly as long as you never outgrow them. This one is the hardest to catch, because it looks like real support right up until the moment it matters most. The moment you get promoted. The moment your prayer finally gets answered. The moment life turns in your favor. That's when the mask slips. I once shared genuinely good news with someone I'd called a friend for years. I expected joy. What I got instead was a tight, forced smile and a fast change of subject. No questions. No shared excitement. Just a cold pivot, as if my blessing had personally inconvenienced their afternoon. Over time, I noticed the pattern. When my life was hard, they were present, warm, attentive. When my life was good, they went quiet, distant, suddenly busy. I finally understood their affection was never rooted in love. It was rooted in comparison. and I was only safe to be near as long as I stayed behind them. Proverbs 14:30 says it this way: "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." When someone's warmth toward you only survives while you stay beneath them, what you're standing in isn't friendship. It's a cage with a smile painted onto the bars. You were never wrong for outgrowing someone whose comfort required you to shrink. Can I be honest for a second? This one still stings a little for me, even writing it now. If a specific face already surfaced while I was describing one of these, brother, sister, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and drop this in the comments below. Lord, give me the boldness to obey you when it comes to who I keep close. Let's press on now, because what comes next is what most believers would rather not admit is true. 4. The friend who makes your faith feel unwelcome. They never attack what you believe. They just make it feel irrelevant every time you're together. I want to be careful here, because this is the one people misunderstand fastest. I'm not talking about someone who doesn't yet know Jesus. We're called to love people who are far from God, and Christ himself sat at tables with sinners and never once made them feel small for it. What I'm describing is different. This is someone in your inner circle who has heard the truth clearly, who has seen it lived out in front of them, and who has quietly decided none of it applies to them. Because of that settled indifference, your faith starts to feel like something you have to apologize for whenever they're in the room. Something tolerated, not welcomed. I knew a young believer whose closest friend since childhood treated faith exactly this way. Every time he tried to talk about what God was stirring in his heart, the subject got changed. Every time he mentioned praying together, it got turned into a joke. Slowly, without even noticing it happening, he stopped bringing God up around that friend at all. His faith didn't disappear, it just went silent, and a silent faith is a shrinking faith. 2 Corinthians 6:14 raises a question that cuts straight through the excuses. What fellowship can light have with darkness? That question isn't meant as a weapon for condemning someone who's still finding their way toward God. It has everything to do with facing a hard truth. When your dearest friend turns your faith into something you carry like a weight, rather than something you get to share like fire, that closeness is costing you eternity a little at a time. 5. The friend who manages your life instead of sharing it. They don't walk beside your decisions, they try to run them. Control rarely introduces itself honestly. It shows up wearing the costume of concern. It sounds like, "I only want what's best for you." It sounds like, "You really should have run that by me before deciding." It sounds like, "Why would you go there without letting me know?" Bit by bit, with no single moment you could point back to, you find yourself checking every decision against their approval instead of God's leading. I watched a friendship like this play out from the outside. A brother I knew from a small group had a friend who needed a say in everything. His career, his church life, even who he spent his afternoons with. Choosing anything without running it past. That friend first brought guilt, cold silence, or sharp little comments, meant to make him regret deciding for himself. Years passed before he recognized that what he'd been calling friendship was actually a form of confinement. And here's what exposed it most. Every time God nudged him towards something bold, a new venture, a leap of faith, a calling worth chasing, that friend was the loudest voice telling him to stay put. Not because the step was foolish, but because it wasn't theirs to approve. Galatians 5:1 speaks directly into this. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. When someone makes obedience to God feel like a betrayal of them, what you're wearing isn't friendship. It's a yoke, and Christ already carried that weight off of you at the cross. 6. The friend who only shows up for your harvest. They love what your life produces more than they love you. There's one honest test for this. Where were they the last time everything fell apart? Where were they when the money got tight? When the ministry hit resistance? When the marriage went through a hard season? When your health failed? Where were they when you had nothing left to offer except your need? I lived through this myself, and it turned into one of the most eye-opening seasons of my walk with God. There came a stretch when His blessing on my life became visible to everyone around me. During that time, my phone rang constantly. Invitations showed up out of nowhere. People wanted to be near whatever God was doing through me. Then the season changed. Testing came. Difficulty arrived, and the visible blessing pulled back for a while. The phone went quiet. The invitation stopped completely, and a sobering truth settled over me about the people I'd once counted close. They had never truly wanted me. They wanted what my season was producing, and those two things live worlds apart. Proverbs 19:4 states it without softening it. Wealth attracts many friends, but even the closest friend of the poor person deserts them. Proverbs 19:6 continues in the same vein, describing how many chase favor with someone influential, and everyone claims closeness to the one who hands out gifts. Those lines were written millennia ago, and they still describe, almost word for word, what plays out inside churches today. If someone shows up only while you're winning and vanishes the instant you're struggling, they were never really your friend. They were a spectator with a good seat, and the instant the show changes, that seat empties out. I want to say something important before we close. This message isn't meant to make you suspicious of everyone in your life, and it's not permission to close your heart off to people. God isn't asking you to punish anyone. He's asking you to be honest about what certain closeness is costing you. Letting go of a friendship ranks among the hardest assignments God will ever hand you, because on the surface it feels like a betrayal of everything you were raised to believe. Love people, be loyal, forgive freely. Every one of those instructions remains true, remains beautiful, but not one of them obligates you to leave your inner circle open to those who keep bruising your spirit, tugging at your faith, or spending the peace God entrusted to you. Loving someone from a healthy distance is not the same thing as granting them unrestricted access to your life. Jesus poured himself out for the crowds, teaching them, healing them, weeping with them. Yet the ones he drew nearest were only three: Peter, James, John. Even God's own Son was deliberate about who he let stand closest to him. Let Proverbs 12:26 land on you one final time. The righteous choose their friends with care. And Proverbs 4:23 adds this: above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Protecting a heart is never the same thing as locking it away. It simply means being wise about who is trusted with the key. God has never asked you to be alone. He's asking you to be aligned, surrounded by people who sharpen instead of dull you, who intercede for you instead of measuring themselves against you, who stay through every chapter, and not only the profitable ones. Release what he's asking you to release, and watch closely what he sends in its place. If something here uncovered a truth about the people you've kept close, here's one thing to do before you go anywhere else. Type this into the comments below. Lord, I place the people I hold close into your hands. That short sentence is still a prayer, and heaven hears every syllable of it. And if there's someone in your life quietly being worn thin by a loyalty they can't seem to release, pass this video along to them today. It might be exactly the word they've been waiting years to hear. Remember to follow this channel so we keep growing in biblical truth week after week. Go in peace and carry this with you this week. Until the next one.